Hello, Africa and the rest of the world. Welcome to News Central Studios, reaching you live from Lagos, Nigeria's economic capital. I'm Sulaiman Alede. The headlines for this hour. World leaders, stakeholders celebrate journalism on World Press Freedom Day. Somalia's semi-autonomous region sentences 5 Al-Shabaab militants to death. South Africa begins second phase of its Covid-19 vaccination campaign. Details of these and more when we return. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said the global challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic underline the critical role of reliable, verified, and universally accessible information. Addressing a virtual event to mark World Press Freedom Day, Mr. Guterres notes that free press and independent journalism is essential to combat misinformation and disinformation. News Central's Chidima Ihenatu has more.
Every year, May 3rd is observed as World Press Freedom Day. According to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, the day is dedicated to freedom of press, emphasizing the need for government and people across the world to respect their commitments to press freedom.
Journalists and media workers help us navigate a fast-changing and often overwhelming landscape of information, while addressing dangerous inaccuracies and falsehoods. In too many countries, they run great personal risk, including new restrictions, censorship, abuse, harassment, detention, and even death, simply for doing their jobs. And the situation continues to worsen.
This year's World Press Freedom Day marks the 30th anniversary of UNESCO Windhoek Declaration for the development of a free, independent, and diverse press. Around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the closure of media. Reporters have been harassed and attacked over time, and the public has struggled to discern verified information from the misrepresentation that have flooded the internet.
The economic impact of the pandemic has hit many media outlets hard, threatening their very survival. As budget tightens, so too does access to reliable information. Rumors, falsehoods, and extreme or divisive opinions surge in to fill the gap. I urge all governments to do everything in their power to support a free, independent and diverse media. Free and independent journalism is our greatest ally in combating misinformation and disinformation.
The theme for this year 2021, Information as a Public Good, serves as a call to affirm the importance of cherishing information as a public good and exploring what can be done in the production, distribution, and reception of content to strengthen journalism and to advance transparency and empowerment while leaving no one behind. Chidima Ihanitu, News Central Television.
Well, joining me for more on World Press Freedom Day, journalist Edache Ochola from the Congress of African Journalists and Larry Arogundade, director at the International Press Center. Gentlemen, good to have you, and congratulations to you both and every journalist out there.
Thank you very much.
Good
Congratulations to you too.
Well, anyway, let me start with you, Edache. How will you rate press freedom at the moment on the continent?
Please come again.
I'm asking how you would want to rate press freedom on the continent.
Oh, for me and for those of us who are members of the Congress of African Journalists, we are looking forward to a situation whereby Africans who are in the practice of journalism are free to put out information, accurate information as they gather to the generality of those who listen to them without harassment from the police or from government, from any government agency at all.
All right, let me bring in Arogundade here. There are a lot of challenges being faced by journalists on the continent. Perhaps you want to tell us what you and your team have found that to be the most, debilitating problems facing journalists?
Well, I would say that the most debilitating problem facing journalists that we have is the fact that democracy in Africa has not translated to greater freedom for the media and for journalists. And an indication of that is that in crisis situations, security agencies in Africa, and particularly here in Nigeria, rarely recognize journalists as frontline workers. There is still that suspicion of the media. There's that feeling that we are not entitled to the kind of information that we try to seek during crisis situations. Now, everybody would normally turn to the media. COVID-19, Boko Haram, people want answers to these questions. And because of that, we keep pestering government spokesperson for that information. But they want to release information that they think is favorable to the government and not necessarily information that is of public interest. So, and that is why I think that it's so good that this year's World Press Freedom Day has as the theme, information for public good. If we don't remove those obstacles, you cannot have information that serves the public good. So for me, I think that is that challenge, to the extent that even under democracy, attempts are still being made to introduce legislations that would further curtail the press freedom space.
Adache, this brings us to you now. Looking at the theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day, one sore thing that many have been asking is the role of, the internet as well as social media. How has this been able to cause a very, disturbing effect in looking at the theme, which is for the public good?
Okay, so the internet has availed practitioners mostly to go all out in spite of all the restrictions that traditional media faces. Now, it is easier to publish your information in real time, especially when you are on the scene of any activity at all. That does not mean that, publishing it becomes easy. It's still as difficult as possible because one has to be mindful of misinformation. That's very critical. Now, for you to be very certain that the information you're putting out, you need to be very sure that it's been verified. If that is not done, of course, you are creating more harm than good. Nevertheless, the internet has availed practitioners enough opportunity to pass information across. And for those of us who are into it, we are leveraging on that as much as possible.
Well, Lara Arogundade, quickly here, earlier I spoke with some journalists across the continent, and some of the key things raised by these journalists borders around not having employers standing up for the privileges and rights of their employees when they get their rights, infringed upon. What does the Press Center do to helping such journalists get redress when they're being abused?
Well, first we try as much as possible to document incidents of abuses of journalists. And on Wednesday, May 5, 2 days time, we're going to release our annual report of attacks on journalists for 2020. One thing we discovered is that for most of these journalists, yes, sometimes the employers do not come to their aid. As a matter of fact, some of them are actually victimized by their employers. And when such occurs, what we'd encourage them to do is to look towards the media professional bodies, media professional associations like the NUJ and the Guild of Editors for intervention. Where there are serious abuses like illegal detention, harassment, and detention, we encourage them to go to court. Because of the way things are in the country, the fact that court processes also take a long time, there's some reluctance to do this. But I'm happy that media organizations like Media Rights Agenda are also setting up a group of lawyers to come to the aid of journalists that are molested. But beyond that, we've also begun to invest in capacity building, in training on safety of journalists, on safety consciousness, because we realize that when we release these figures as they have been released today, so many journalists attacked and so on. Those figures hide the psychosocial trauma that these journalists go through, the psychological problems that they face. And so we just started a program, a training, where we're trying to address the question of trauma in the coverage of dangerous assignments. And a few days ago, we had the first of that for 50 journalists drawn from the northern part of the country, where we had specialists, including a clinical psychologist, talking to journalists about management of their health in crisis situations. For us, this is an aspect of press freedom that we do not pay enough attention to, that we should be paying attention to as we discuss the role of the media in providing information for the public good.
Well, thank you for your time, Larry Arugudade, Director, International Press Center, and Dacho Chola from the Congress of African Journalists.
Thank you very much.
Well, still on World Press Freedom Day, the United States Consulate in Lagos, Nigeria's southwest region, has promised to uphold and champion free and independent press for the overall good of the populace and democracy. This was echoed at a webinar organized by the consulate to commemorate the day. Details of these and more in this package.
What type of stupid question is that? Bankrolling who? Do you know who you are talking to? I will not take any questions from this man.
Do you know that journalists face intimidation, harassment, arrest, and violence in exercising their rights? Well, the United States joins the international community in celebrating World Press Freedom Day. The U.S. Consulate on Monday held a Press Freedom Day webinar with stakeholders discussing the theme, Frontiers of Health Reports, New Insights, Fresh Perspective.
We all know that a free press is essential to a healthy democracy. The news media can be a powerful force for change. It can effectively fulfill the role of a watchdog, a gatekeeper, and an agenda setter. It can improve governance by raising citizen awareness of social issues, by enabling citizens to hold their governments to account, to curb corruption, and to create a civic forum for debate. I challenge you to continue playing this effective role in amplifying the important issues that affect citizens. I know it's not easy, and I know that sometimes it's a risk to our personal safety and our family safety, but it is the most important thing in preserving democracy.
Freedom of expression and access to factual and accurate information provided by independent media is foundational to prosperous and secure democratic societies. Stakeholders gave an insight on tracking and analyzing public health budgets.
Across the country, especially when it comes to health, and the end result is that people end up either losing their lives or getting very poor quality health care. The picture I have on the screen is that of a few women receiving their treatments under trees somewhere in Sokoto a few years back, when some of our colleagues went to track that particular health facility in Kafi.
According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, the number of journalists killed in retaliation for their reporting more than doubled, with Mexico and Afghanistan seeing the largest number of killings in 2020. Veterans in the media world said, information and knowledge are powerful tools, and a free and independent press is a core institution connecting the public to the information they need to advocate for themselves, make informed decisions, and hold government officials accountable.
A dispute over the succession of late South African Zulu king Goodwill Zwelithini is now headed to court. The first wife, Queen Sibongile Dlamini, is challenging the execution of the late monarch's will and naming the next king amid claims that his last will may have been forged. The news of legal action comes days after the death of Queen Sibongile Dlamini Zulu. She had been appointed as regent on March 24 after King Zwelithini died in hospital from diabetes-related complications at the age of 72. Earlier, we spoke to South African journalist and editor Diane Hawker on the succession battle in the Zulu royal family.
Well, what we've learned from the Zulu royal family, as well as from the provincial government, both of Gauteng and of KwaZulu-Natal, is that there will be a process of transferring the remains of the late Queen from Johannesburg, where she was actually hospitalized and where she passed away, taking her to KZN, to one of the rural homes there. And that is where she will actually be interred early on Thursday morning. It won't be a public burial, partly due to the COVID-19 restrictions, but also due to some of the cultural aspects and also her own wishes. We saw something similar taking place with the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, where the actual burial process was something that was done late at night with a very limited number of people being allowed to attend. And then on Friday, there's expected to be a memorial service, which the provincial government in KwaZulu-Natal has actually requested from the national government that this service should be done as an official provincial funeral, which would mean that there would be some element of government organization as well as provision made for the attendance of dignitaries, both from within South Africa and externally. We know that the late Queen originates from Swaziland, and there is an expectation that there will be representatives from the Swazi royal family attending that service on Friday.
Now, prosecutors in France have asked magistrates to drop legal proceedings against 5 French military officers linked to a massacre of ethnic Tutsi during the Rwanda genocide of 1994. Investigators say they found no evidence of complicity by the French peacekeeping troops. The officers had been accused of survivors of abandoning Tutsis in the Bisesero region, leading to a massacre by ethnic Hutu extremists. In March, a major French report concluded that France bore serious and overwhelming responsibilities linked to the Rwanda genocide, but cleared it of complicity. The United Nations mission in South Sudan is bringing together local implementing partners that collaborate with the mission in actioning quick impact projects across Sudan. The event, facilitated by the Relief, Reintegration and Protection section, aims to train local partners in Central Equatoria State and the full QIP spectrum. UN mission facilitators describe the workshop as timely. Now, in the Horn of Africa, Somalia's northeastern semi-autonomous Puntland regional state has sentenced 5 Al-Shabaab militants to death. The chief of the Puntland military court, Colonel Ali Shire, said the 5 were found guilty of carrying out attacks targeting government officials. The convicts have 30 days to appeal against the sentencing. On April 23, the same court sentenced 8 Al-Shabaab militants to death for carrying out killings and explosions in parts of Mudok region. Now, staying in Somalia, Prime Minister Mohamed Roble has invited the leaders of federal member states for a meeting aimed at ending the Horn of Africa's country's elections deadlock. Now, the consultative meeting has been scheduled for May 20 after Parliament cancelled its earlier move to extend the term of President Mohamed Farmajo for another 2 years. President Farmajo had earlier bowed to pressure and appointed the Prime Minister to spearhead the election process. News Central's East Africa correspondent Abdi Nouri Aden has to report.
It was a day that the rest of the world marked Labor Day, but it had a different meaning altogether for this Horn of Africa nation. It was a day that more than 140 MPs of the House of the People converged to rescind their earlier decision, which will have delayed the already stalled elections for another period of 24 months. The President of the Federal Republic of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed Farmajo, addressed the Lower House, which had on April the 12th reached a resolution to take the Republic to a one-person, one-vote. They gathered here today to take the public to another path of indirect elections. And the President, the man at the center of attention, appeared before the MPs to plead for a change of direction from one person, one vote to the September 17, 2020 indirect election-based political agreement.
mudanayaal marwooyin waxaan dhammaantiin idinka codsanaya idinka oo xiirinaya duruufaha siyaasadeed ee dalka ku gaadaaman iyo marxaladaha cakiran ee aan ku jirno inaad nala qaadataan in lagu noqdo ama lagu laabto heshiiskii wada ogolka ahaa ee aad ansixiseen 26 Sebtembar 2020.
President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo continued and made a key decision in the entire electoral process, handing over the election facilitation to Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble.
Walaha sharafta leh waxaan rabaa inaan caddeeyo in Ra'iisul Wasaare Mohamed Hussein Roble uu hogaamin doono diyaarinta iyo hirgelinta doorashada iyo amniga doorashada.
Following the completion of the procedures, the president made a rallying call for peace, sending his sympathies to the victims of recent clashes in the capital, Mogadishu.
Waxaan rabaa inaan halkan uga faa'iideysto inaan u tacsiyeeyo ama tacsi u diro dadkii ku waxyeeloobay. Allah ha u naxariisto intii ku dhimatay, intii dhaawacantayna Allah ka kiciyo. Xiisadihii magaalada ka dhacay maalmihii la soo dhaafay taasi oo ahayd mid laga murugoodo oo laga baaqsan karay.
Later this evening, Prime Minister Mohamed Roble reacted to the developments by welcoming the new responsibility while promising the citizens, the nation and the partners of a transition away from the elections-related drama. For now, all eyes are on the federal member states to see whether they shall honor the 17 September 2020 political agreement.
Now, Burundian President Evariste Ndayishimiye has sacked the country's Commerce Minister Immaculée Ndabaneze. Now, this, according to a statement from the presidency, with sources within the administration claiming she embezzled funds on an airline. Ndabaneze was sacked over the illegal sale of the last plane of the now-defunct Air Burundi and for allegedly embezzling funds earmarked for Burundi Airlines, the country's future flagship carrier. The plane, a Beechcraft 1900, had been dormant for more than a decade and was sold to a South African businessman without government approval. Now, still ahead, Africa records 4.57 million new infections as death hit more than 122,000. The details of these and more after now. Welcome back. Now, some good news on the continent, and that's in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where authorities have announced the end of the latest outbreak of Ebola that killed 6 people. The declaration comes 3 months after a resurgence of the disease was reported in North Kivu and the country's eastern region. The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, says a quick response by the authorities and partners had helped contain the outbreak. In the latest outbreak, 11 people became infected and 6 died. Now, South Africa is set to start the second phase of its Covid-19 vaccination rollout. This follows yesterday's arrival of the first batch of Covid-19 vaccines from Pfizer. The country kick-started its vaccine rollout just under 2 months ago after receiving batches of the J&J vaccine. But the country's vaccine rollout program stalled last month after 7 people who had received the vaccine in the United States died as a result of blood clots. Joining me this night to look at this is journalist and editor Candice Bailey. Good to see you again, Candice.
Good evening, Suleiman.
Now, quickly, why has the country moved over to the Pfizer vaccine?
Suleiman, we haven't moved over to the Pfizer vaccine per se. The Pfizer vaccine was always part of South Africa's COVID-19 vaccine rollout plan. When we received the Johnson & Johnson vaccines in March this year, we were told that the Pfizer vaccine would be used in the second phase of the vaccination program. The government has also said that they are not willing to put the eggs in one basket, and they have been chatting to various manufacturers about getting vaccines. This includes Russia for the Sputnik vaccine as well as China for the Sinovac vaccine. So it's all part of the vaccination plan of South Africa.
This definitely will mean some kind of relief for many South Africans. How are they taking the news?
They're taking the news very well. I think that the stall in the vaccination program last week has been concerning for many people. There is lots of criticism from the public health sector as well as the academic sector that South Africa is behind in terms of its vaccination rollout plans. I think the fact that we've gotten these vaccines is good news.
This good news can only sit pretty well if the people know their fate. Tell us if the government has now completely abandoned the J&J vaccine in place of the Pfizer vaccine.
No, the J&J vaccine hasn't been abandoned, Suleiman. What's happened is that the ban has been lifted now that our Health Products Regulatory Authority applied its mind to the map in the US. They were able to say conclusively that the risk of getting a clot was less than the risk of getting a virus, and therefore decided that we should resume our vaccination program of Johnson & Johnson. So the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer vaccine will be rolled out simultaneously. We have only vaccinated about 380,000 health workers in South Africa at the moment. We need to vaccinate about 1 million. But the Pfizer vaccine will definitely be used for phase 2, which targets essential workers like teachers and police officers, as well as community workers, people over the age of 60, as well as people over the age of 40 with comorbidities.
Well, Candace, before I let you go, the variant in India and that of South Africa, that has actually led to some countries putting some travel restriction, from travelers coming in from India. Are there moves by the South African government to also look in that direction to stop people coming in or going into India?
Not at this stage, Salim. What our national Communicable Diseases Institute has told us is that they are keeping a close eye on this matter. They are prioritizing of people that travel in from India. We do have confirmation this evening that there is one person that tested positive for corona that traveled from India and is now being treated at an hospital in KwaZulu-Natal, but they're not sure if it's variant at this stage. So still keeping a close eye, but at this stage, travel hasn't been restricted yet.
Candace Billy, many thanks as always for unpacking this for us.
Thanks, Lemon.
Now, the number of COVID-19 infections in Africa has reached 4.57 million on Monday as the continent continues efforts to curb further spread of the virus. The latest figures published by the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed the continent has also recorded more than 122,000 virus-related deaths. South Africa remains to be the hardest hit country by the pandemic in Africa, with 1.58 million confirmed cases and over 54,000 deaths. Now, these account for 34.63% of the continent's caseload and 44.48% of its fatalities. In total, 15 countries on the continent have reported more than 1,000 virus-related fatalities. A citizen-funded COVID-19 effort in Malawi has received an award from Queen Elizabeth for its work fighting the coronavirus pandemic. The Queen says the initiative shows the utmost transparency in the use of its privately raised funding. Malawi's COVID Response Private Citizens Initiative started in January when the country's hospitals were overwhelmed with coronavirus patients and lacked resources at the peak of the second wave of the pandemic. Dr. Tandy Majenda Hara, the deputy lead organizer for the initiative, says the group spearheaded a crowdfunding campaign that raised $286,000 to buy oxygen cylinders, ventilators, personal protective equipment, as well as other items most needed in public hospitals. The statistics released by the Nigerian security tracker has shown that at least 100,000 persons have been killed and over 10,000 are badly displaced owing to the rising insecurity across Nigeria. Now, security experts in the nation's commercial capital, Lagos, are calling for the government to provide urgent and decisive measures to deal with Boko Haram militancy, kidnapping and banditry, which have contributed to the state of insecurity in Nigeria. News Central's Mary Chinde looks at how insecurity is becoming a threat to Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria.
The last few weeks in Nigeria have been replete with stories of insecurity, from jailbreaks in Imo State and Benin City in the southern part of the country to abduction of school children in the northwest. In the north central, it has been armed herdsmen ravaging farming communities with bloodshed and a heavy death toll. Only 2 weeks ago, Rivers State in southern Nigeria witnessed the gruesome killing of several security personnel at their duty post, forcing the state governor to declare a state of emergency.
It has become imperative for the state government to take further necessary measures to secure our state and safeguard lives and property. Accordingly, the State Security Council has today, after exhaustive deliberation, decided and advised that a statewide curfew on human and vehicular movements be imposed as part of additional measures to prevent the faceless criminals from unleashing their deadly actions.
How are residents of Rivers State coping with the dusk to dawn curfew? Lexi, who lives in Port Harcourt, the capital, shares his experience.
The government did well to impose that right on time. But the bad part of it is that it affects the entertainment sector seriously. Shows are being cancelled, people are shifting dates and programs, and that's how we survive.
As the death toll hits over 1 million, according to Amnesty International, experts say the Nigerian government hasn't done enough to contain insecurity.
The command structure through which the war on insecurity is being fought needs to be decentralized. Currently, everything is being fought out of Abuja. So there is one command structure for the military in Abuja, there's one command structure for the police in Abuja. And what that does is that when everything is centralized to that extent, it creates inefficiency.
Some of the country's regions have been coming up with seemingly self-suited strategies to combat insecurity, such as Amotekun in the southwest and Ebubago in the southeast.
We're having issues in the north, we're having issues in the south. Everywhere is boiling. But the southeast has a little bit of dual hydra issue, because now we're dealing with the real issue, but also has another head.
Structures are there. We have a federal government that takes decisions at the federal level, and we have state governors who are chief security officers of their state. So all this idea of regional security outfits is creating more complication, because it's giving an impression that a region wants to break away or not.
It's barely 24 months away from the 2023 elections, when the nation is expected to hold its general elections. But with the insecurity intensifying, it casts doubts on how this could happen if the situation is not arrested. Mary Chinda for News Central TV.
Security agencies in Europe arrest 4 men in one of the biggest cases of online child sex abuse. Details after now. The German police have arrested 3 men, and a 4th is being held in Paraguay for allegedly running one of the world's biggest online networks for sharing images of child sex abuse. The international operation, involving several police forces, targeted a darknet platform called Boys Town, which has now been taken down. Officials say Boys Town had more than 400,000 registered users. Now, they say some images showed the most serious sexual abuse of young children. The German-led investigation involved law enforcement agencies in the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia and the US, as well as Canada. Now, foreign ministers of the G7 rich countries gathered in London on Monday for their first in-person meeting since the Covid-19 pandemic began. British host Dominic Raab opened with talks with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Raab and Blinken are also expected to discuss ongoing trade talks with the United States as Britain seeks a far elusive deal touted by Prime Minister Boris Johnson as one of the biggest opportunities opened by quitting the European Union. Britain is keen to capitalize on Biden's willingness to re-engage with global efforts to fight climate change and to restore a nuclear deal with Iran.
We talked about our shared commitment to stand up for open societies, democracy and human rights, protecting fundamental freedoms, tackling disinformation, holding human rights abusers to account. We talked, a key element of this is defending the rule of law, so we're determined to reform but reinforce the multilateral system. We want to keep working together very closely on all of these points through the G7 and President Biden's Democracy Summit. We also discussed China. I think it's fair to say we see eye to eye on the need to stand up for our values, holding Beijing to the commitments that they've made, whether it's in relation to Hong Kong under the joint declaration or wider commitments, whilst also at the same time finding constructive ways to work with China in a sensible and positive manner where that's possible. That's important, I think, on global issues like climate change. We want to see China stepping up to the plate and playing its full role. Tony and I also discussed a whole range of security issues, Iran, Afghanistan, continuing concerns about Russia, in particular on the border with Ukraine. We stand shoulder to shoulder on these issues, and I welcome the US's firm recommitment to the NATO alliance. It's only by working together overseas that we can keep our citizens safe at home, and I think that's true in NATO, and I think it's true on COVID and the various measures that we're taking to extend and expand and promote COVAX. Secretary Blinken and I will see the Prime Minister tomorrow to continue the discussions that we've had. One of the major areas of common interest is building a broader and stronger set of partnerships among countries that share our values on the most important issues of the day. So the G7 Foreign and Development Ministers meeting, which begins today, is a great opportunity to really drive that agenda forward.
The work we do together serves our people's interests across a vast array of issues, many of which Dominic touched on, including maintaining our national security, rejuvenating our economies on a sustainable and more equitable basis. I think our bilateral relationship is also vital to the world. The work that we do together advances progress on the most urgent global issues, and global issues that are having a real impact on the lives of our citizens, including stopping COVID-19, addressing the threat of climate change, defending democratic values and open societies.
Now, South Africa's rand got off to a weak start against a firmer US dollar on Monday, with investors awaiting a raft of local and global data this week. The rand traded at 14.52 against the dollar, at 0.24% weaker than its close on Friday, when it suffered losses of more than 1%. On the domestic front, manufacturing survey, new vehicle sales and reserves data due this week are expected to provide some insights into the health of the local economy. Government bonds also weakened in early deals, with the yield on the instrument due in 2030 up by 1.5 basis points to 9.305%. Tululokwe has the rest of the business news.
Continent.
Thank you so much, Suleiman. We start in East Africa, where the battle for the lucrative Ethiopian telecommunications market has narrowed down to consortia led by two of Africa's telecom giants, Vodacom and the MTN Group. This sets another stage for a long-established competition for the continental market. The bids of the two consortia have been led by Safaricom on one hand and the MTN Group on the other, and were opened by the Ethiopian Communication Authority Evaluation Committee recently. Vodacom, South Africa's largest mobile phone operator, which owns 35% of shares in Safaricom, is in the consortium brought together by the Kenyan firm. This group is made up of the UK parent Vodafone, UK Sovereign Wealth Fund CDC Group, and the Japanese conglomerate Sumitomo Corporation. Now 9 other firms, including Etisalat, Axian, Orange, Saudi Telecom Company, and Telcom SA, which expressed interest in the deal, have already pulled out of the bidding process. Safaricom, Vodafone, and Vodacom offer voice, messaging, data, entertainment, and financial services to at least 452 million customers in Africa, Europe, and India. The consortium has also lined up a $500 million loan from America's Sovereign Wealth Fund, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. Today, oil price dropped towards $66 a barrel as concern about demand in India and higher OPEC Plus supply offset optimism over rising demand in other major consumers such as China and the United States. India earlier today reported more than 300,000 new coronavirus cases for a 12th straight day. The new wave of the virus has already led to a drop in fuel sales in the world's third largest consumer in April. Brent crude fell about 0.5% to $66.45 a barrel. Scientists predict a peak in India's infections in the coming days, and analysts expect oil demand to take a further hit. However, Brent has still rallied almost 30% this year, recovering from last year's historic lows thanks to record supply cuts by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies, together known as OPEC+. Total's decision to suspend its $20 billion projects in northern Mozambique indefinitely has effectively put an anticipated $120 billion gas boom on hold. It comes as neighboring Tanzania finds renewed momentum in the race to develop East Africa's gas resources before a global campaign to end the use of fossil fuels renders them valueless. Mozambique is in the 4th year of a rapidly worsening Islamist militant insurgency in its gas-rich province. Total has decided that it is too dangerous to operate there after an attack in the town of Palma drove victims to the gates of its project. Tanzania's new president, Samia Hassan, has breathed fresh energy into her nation's projects by quickly resuming negotiations with companies to try and conclude an agreement within 6 months. President Hassan has also stressed the need for Tanzania to work with investors and get projects up and running after they stalled in 2019. Some calm returned to the Nigeria Exchange Limited at the close of trading on Friday, with some interesting outcomes. The details in this report.
It is open secret that the oldest bank in Nigeria now has a new board to oversee its affairs into the nearest future, with the sacking of the previous board. And the market responded on Thursday with the selling off of FBN Holdings share on the bourse. Incidentally, with the new board and the reinstatement of the sacked MD/CEO, Adeshola Adeduton, the market also reacted on the bright note. MD Trust Bank Capital Management Limited, Aziz Lawal, explains the market's reaction.
It was more of a return of price to status quo. You know, the previous day, we saw investors offloading the shares of FBNH on the back of the removal of the board of the company by the CBN. So it was more of a panic reaction. And that was on Thursday when the shares of the company lost about 6.76% thereabout. And then on Friday was more of restore of confidence. I mean, if you know FBN very well, it carries so much value. So the loss that was recorded the previous day was more of panic sale as a result of the removal of the board of the company, of the bank by the CBN. So we expect that in the coming trading days, so we expect that we'll also see an uptrend in price of FBN and more interest in it to take the price back to 7.4 that it was before the saga started.
One of FBN's main creditors, Honeywell Flour Mills, who was asked to repay back all its loan, also experienced an improved performance at the close of trading.
Honeywell and FBN, they are closely related. The thing is now, if FBN is benefiting at one end, as it is, Honeywell cannot benefit. So what we saw was more of, of course, it was a thing of interest for investors. That was why it was heavily traded. But in this case, it was more of still because they know CBN is coming for. CBN through FBN is coming for Honeywell, since the Apex Bank has told the owners of Honeywell to pay back all loans outstanding to FBN within 48 hours. If you're an investor in that kind of company, you definitely want to offload your stocks to take your loss and move forward.
These cherry news further indicate the confidence investors have on the NGX as a platform for creating wealth in Nigeria and possibly for Africa.
And a bit of international business before I go. Now, TikTok has named Singaporean Chu Zi as its new CEO in a strategic reorganization that now sees top executives based out of its various global offices, including Singapore and the United States. The Chinese social media platform also announced Australian Vanessa Papas as its new chief operating officer. This comes 8 months after its former leader called it quits as the United States was threatening to ban the app. The new CEO joined the company earlier this year as Chief Financial Officer of ByteDance, TikTok's Chinese owner. And that's business on NC Continental Prime. I'm Tolulokwe Adelari Balogun. It's back to Suleiman.
Many thanks, Tolulokwe. Well, there's been quite a number of reports today, and well, it's time for us to get some reactions, and for that we go to our digital team, Shew Bankole.
It's a brand new episode of NC Trends. Welcome, I am Shew Bankole. Senior advocates of nonsense, hashtag bring back combis, and Christ Embassy are major topics generating conversations online across the African continent. Let's begin in Nigeria, where rapper Idris Abdulkarim is trending for referring to Festus Keyamo as the senior advocate of nonsense, a play on words on Senior Advocates of Nigeria, SAN. The singer-songwriter had earlier in April released the remix of his timeless 2004 classic Jaga Jaga, where he mentioned Keyamo. Now, the State Minister for Labour and Employment responded with accusations that the hip-hop icon Idris Abdulkarim had resorted to blackmail after failing to extort money from him and other government officials. He further backed his claims on social media, uploading screenshots of text message exchanges between himself and Idris Abdulkarim. In a swift response now, Idris has released another track titled Jaga Jaga Otigete, dissing Keyamo. Some of the comments online include at I am Polukemi's tweet that reads, Idris mentioned Festus Keyamo name. Did they show receipts? Ordinary mention though. Now, dude don't release a whole track. Call him senior advocates of nonsense. I'm so loving this drama, man. Moving on. At Fisayo on board tweeted, hypocrites like Idris criticizing governments because they didn't get what they wanted from their friends in power or because of their alliance with the opposition, and have mastered the art of disguising personal beef as public interest. One by one shall you be exposed. But Keyamo, we move away from that. Man tweeted, Idris Abdulkarim really called Festus Keyamo senior advocate of nonsense in his new song. Bro, I can't even lie, this song sounds good. Idris is really having a lot of fun with this. Keyamo done the kolomo. All right, that's that on senior advocates of nonsense. Moving swiftly away from that, Zimbabweans are calling for the return of passenger buses called combis, which was banned last year when the lockdown started. MDC Alliance President Nelson Chamisa said the government should lift the ban on combi operators, arguing that the Zimbabwe United Passenger Company Zuku monopoly is not only illegal, but has rendered thousands of Zimbabwean youths jobless after they were forced to pack their combis. Using the hashtag #BringBackCombis, Bongo expressed agreements with the MDC Alliance President. At Forever_ZW tweeted, public transport must be regulated strictly, conditions of vehicles kept high, and most importantly, public safety and accountability top priority. Combis endanger lives daily. Hits and runs are normal for them. They rank wherever, whenever. No order, just chaos. Good move by the governor. Moving swiftly away from that, Joseph tweeted in response to Nelson Chamisa, "It's just colonial mentality banning the poor from operating business. Why not close all mines which damage the environment first before you ban combis, which cause less pollution?" Finally, on Bring Back Combis, at Fanny Map Fumo tweeted, "The regulator cannot be a player as well. In banning private transport, government is trying to monopolize the transport sector." Lastly, we'll take a trip to Ghana, where the police have served an investigation notice into the alleged breach of COVID-19 protocols at Christ Embassy Youth Church's Pneumatic Night. Videos and images from the event, which held last Friday, have surfaced online, and it got many Ghanaians talking. We'll start with this tweet from @IamSleet, who says, "Good. After this, let's arrest all the politicians for their rallies as well, no exceptions." At Travel with Co also tweeted, "For the police to have any case in this matter, they should give us an answer to this question. The crowd that was gathered at Christ Embassy for the service on Friday night, how different was it from the crowd we saw during our political rallies over the December elections?" Finally on that, Ranjit tweeted, "Please arrest all of them and teach them a lesson. Because of this, someone's innocent grandmother in the village will catch COVID and die." You can still join the conversation. Tweet at New Central TV using any of the hashtags, and let's know your thoughts. There you have it on this episode of NC Trends. Back to Sulai with the news.
Well, quite a lot there from Show. But now let's look at what's happening in the world of sports. Udoka, you know, what really interests me is that protest by fans of Manchester United, and now they pose a threat, saying that, look, if you don't engage, we just might come out again.
Exactly. Of course, the fans have a right to protest against the management right there at Manchester United. They want to change, and it's looking likely that the fans will get what they want. And this is also happening at the Emirates with the Arsenal fans as well. They also want Kroenke out of the leadership position. So let's see what happens in coming days.
All right, then, tell us more then.
All right, and for the rest of sports, let's go straight to Egypt, where Egyptian basketball side Al Ahly has officially appointed legendary basketball coach Mario Palma to take charge of the team for the coming period. And last week, Al Ahly lost to Ittihad of Alexandria in the Egypt Cup final under head coach Ashraf Tawfiq, who resigned from his position immediately after the game, along with the rest of the coaching staff. Now, the Reds quickly found his replacement in the five-time Afro-Basket champion. Palma will be arriving in Cairo alongside his assistant, Vasco Corrado, with the remainder of the 11-man coaching staff already appointed by the club. Going over to football, there's drama down in the Cape after City FC plays head coach Jan-Ode Riekerink on administrative leave with immediate effect. Now, the Premiership confirmed the news on Twitter, adding that assistant coach Diogo Peral will take charge of the team until further notice. Now, 58-year-old Riekerink was named Cape Town City coach in November 2019 following Benny McCarthy's departure. Now, the team's next game will be to Bloemfontein Celtic on Wednesday, the 12th of May by 7:30. And still in football, Paulo Duarte has been named as the new coach of Togo's men's national team, but he will not be starting his job until August. Now, the former two-time Burkina Faso boss has signed a 3-year deal to replace Frenchman Claude Leroy, who resigned last month. And the 52-year-old Portuguese coach will continue in charge of the Angolan champions Primeiro de Agosto, who he led to the top of the table with 13 matches left to play. His first competitive game in charge will be in September with back-to-back World Cup games against Congo-Brazzaville. And going straight to Rwanda football, the management of SC Kiyovo have parted ways with their head coach Olivier Karekezi, accusing the tactician of breaching COVID-19 protocols. Since the appointment in the team, Karekezi has failed to impress his employers as the club has been struggling for results. Now, the club secretary general Omar Munyengabe says the club had no idea about the tactician's whereabouts, who left the camp since their loss last weekend. And Manchester United, talking about the English Premier League, the Supporters Trust has urged coach chairman Joe Glazer to engage with fans to avoid a repeat of the protests at Old Trafford on Sunday. United's Premier League match against Liverpool was called off after about 200 fans broke into the ground. And the Football Association is investigating the incident and said it understood fan frustrations. An investigation by Greater Manchester Police is underway into the violent disorder around the protest, and the 28-year-old man has been arrested. Assistant Chief Constable Nick Bailey said the behavior shown at the protest was absolutely atrocious. The fans have been angered by United's decision alongside 5 fellow Premier League clubs to join the European Super League last month before subsequently all pulling out. That's a wrap on sports. I hand over to Sulai.
Well, many thanks, Udoka. Now, quite a number of things happening around the world. More than 30,000 people in Burundi have been affected by the rising water level of Lake Tanganyika. The International Organization for Migration says farmers and fishermen in coastal Mitumbuzi as well as the Gutumba region have lost an entire year's worth of food. For more on these, let's see what the weather is like in other parts of the continent. And that's all on the news of this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of the major stories. World leaders, stakeholders have celebrated journalism on World Press Freedom Day. Somalia's semi-autonomous region has sentenced 5 Al-Shabaab militants to death. And finally, we told you that South Africa has begun phase 2 of its COVID-19 vaccination campaign. Well, follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can also catch up with our news and programs. Just download the News Central TV mobile app in Play Store and Apple Store. You can also watch us live on Star Times, channel 274. I'm Sulaiman. Later, many thanks for watching.